Okay, we're now officially recording. Welcome to the first exhibition night of 2021. Stuart, would you like to tell us about our judges?
Yes, happy to. And I want to say happy Groundhog Day to everybody. So our first judge, Ralph Clevenger, grew up on the coast of North Africa and began diving in the waters of the Mediterranean Sea at the age of 7. He studied zoology and worked as a diver biologist for the Scripps Institute of Oceanography before attending Brooks Institute of Photography. Ralph specializes in commercial photography and video of eco-travel, wildlife, and underwater subjects. He's the author of the book Photographing Nature, and he was a faculty member at Brooks Institute for over 33 years. And Ralph is now a member of our club, but he's still, because of his extreme experience, he's still judging for us as a pro, because that's truly what he is. So thank you so much, Ralph, for being a judge again.
Yeah, you're welcome. Very welcome.
Our next judge is Monica Furmansky. Monica was born and raised in Southern California. She studied fine art and photography at Scripps College, where she received her Bachelor of Art, and at the Claremont Graduate School, where she received her Master of Fine Art. Monica started teaching in 2006 and has taught digital and analog photography at Oxnard and Ventura College, as well as at Cate School. She co-directs the artist-run gallery 643 Project Space in Ventura with her husband, Matthew Furmansky, which they have operated since 2007. Monica has been working with photography for the past 27 years and continues to challenge traditional notions about the function of photography. Her work is at the Samela Lewis Contemporary Art Collection, at the Williamson Gallery, at the Hyatt Regency in San Francisco, the Community Memorial Hospital Permanent Collection, and she's exhibited in many venues, which recently include Photo LA in Los Angeles and in Berlin, Germany, and a solo exhibition at Cal State Channel Islands Napa Hall Gallery. So Monica, thank you so much for judging again for us this year. Our club judge tonight is Jeff Lipschitz. He grew up in Cape Town, South Africa, where he got his first camera at age 10. He moved to the States in 1977, where he furthered his OB/GYN career with a subspecialty in perinatal medicine. In 2000, Jeff moved to Santa Barbara and attended Brooks Institute of Photography. Jeff has had several solo and group exhibitions and has won numerous awards for his photography. His photos hang in private and corporate collections, including 25 of his photographs hanging in the Santa Barbara and Goleta Cottage hospitals. Jeff's passion is travel photography with a particular interest in documenting disappearing cultures around the world. And Jeff, thank you so much for being a judge tonight. And I turn it back to you, Bill.
All right. Can we have Jeff and Monica just say hi, make sure that they're coming up on the screen here?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
and you're popping up, that's good. Monica, how about you?
Hi, everyone.
So we're all familiar with the scoring rubric from the 3 to the 9. A total of 21 points between all 3 judges gives an image accepted status. Our first category is what formerly altered reality. I won't spend a lot of time on it. It's changed. If you did altered reality in the past, you can do exactly what you're doing, but this allows some additional opportunity to show effective post-production techniques that don't necessarily have to create a radically altered reality. At this point, we will get started with the acrylic house, and the critique is from Jeff Lipschitz.
Okay, it's a difficult one to start with because it's very hard to determine what was photographed and what post-production there was. So I'll just look at it as an abstract sort of with black lines forming different shapes and filled by colors, mainly green and blue. It's very, I find, I'm going to mention a few images tonight, sort of a focal point where your eye lands in the photograph. And looking at this one, it's very difficult to find somewhere for your eye to settle down. It sort of wanders around. The one thing that does stand out is a different color, for instance, the pink on the left side of the screen. If that was in the middle or closer to the middle, you'd say that could be the focal point, but it's right off on the side. You know, we don't have people send in the photo, but in this case, I think it would have helped me a lot to have seen the before photo. So I think it's fairly well done, and I really don't have any idea how to improve it. So that's basically all.
Okay, Acrylic House scored 20.
Our next image is Ealing's Park Trees, critique from Monica Fermansky.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, this photograph, even if it's manipulated, actually was quite stunning. I really like this. Well, first of all, I really like the way the photographer framed the shot. I think, though, the centering of the tree is really critical in this image. There's a really nice balance of the amount of tree. The sky in the background doesn't overtake the tree very much. Whoever the artist is or photographer is who chose to, I'm assuming, colorize the tree with these various hues and tones of the magentas and some subtle oranges. It was a really interesting choice. It feels a little old-fashioned in some sense. It's playing with sepia tones, it's playing with a vintage quality at the same time, but also it has these feelings of something a little otherworldly. So it's an intriguing photograph. I think that the lines of the tree cause a lot of motion and movement through the photograph. It keeps me visually engaged. So I think it's, again, I think it's a striking image to play with and to manipulate in the way that this artist manipulated it. Was quite playful and effective.
Okay, Ealing's Park Trees scored 20.
Next image is Finding Balance, critique by Ralph Clevenger.
The postwork on this is very appropriate for the setting, which is sort of a oriental setting, and it's quite creative. It reminds me of willows and grasses, which again fits in with the whole Japanese garden concept. The design could be improved by centering the subject perfectly. So this thing has a lot of symmetry. The background is symmetrical. So just moving the person over slightly or shifting your position slightly could have centered the person perfectly. And that really would have, I think, enhanced this overall. I think it's a great use of color. I love the use of the blue.
All right, Finding Balance scored 22.
Next image is Morning Shadows. The critique is from Jeff Lipchitz.
This is an interesting image, and I love the color, which is just mainly, the tonal range is brown. And the image is made up of a few dark shapes. It looks like a window on the right or a trellis. The background looks like blurred trees. And I think the part that really catches your eye the most is that dark shape in the top left of the image. So I think it's an interesting image, and I think the strongest point is the mono color of brown with some of the shapes and background. I don't have any suggestions for any improvements.
Okay, Morning Shadows scored 23.
Next image is No Shit Sherlock, a critique from Monica Formansky.
Are we allowed to say that, really?
I don't think so. I put an asterisk on it on Flickr so they wouldn't kick
My
it.
ears, I'm not sure. I'm just you know, this one is interesting. I really like the angle that this photograph was shot from. It's like ominous. It's got the dark skies in the background, and it really works with, you know, this whole notion of Sherlock Holmes, right? And the little bits of details that we get from the underground and London and so forth. The filter, assuming that this photographer used a filter effect to enhance the kind of dramatic qualities of this photograph, it does work with it. Am I a huge fan of this filter? Personally, it's not one of my favorite filters, but I can see why this person chose to play with this effect. And it really brings out the shadows and the highlights in the Sherlock figure. And then that, like I said before, kind of that ominous quality of the image, that mysterious quality. So it like works in that way. It's interesting. Again, I like the angle it was shot. I love that diagonal and the forced perspective, and it works for whatever this photographer was intending to create. Looks good.
All right, No Shit Sherlock scored 22.
Next image is Shockwave, and this is critiqued by Ralph Clevenger.
I love this image. The design and the balance of tones is excellent. My only comment is the purple colored squiggly lines. I'm not sure if they help the composition. I think it would work just as well, maybe better without those. If you really want the squiggly lines, I would probably add a third one to balance it out down that lower left area. So the whole thing sort of balances a little better. I'm not sure what it is, but it looks like flower petals. So I really think you did a nice job on this picture.
All right, Shockwave scored 24.
Next image is They Came From Below, critiqued by Jeff Lipschitz.
Found this a very interesting image showing rocks, caves, ocean, and the figures seem almost like they're made out of the same rock material. Again, as before, there's a uniform color tone except for the red, which is in the caves. I like the way the figures are positioned, and you get some creation of depth by having, for instance, the figure in the front on the right bottom much larger than the figure at the back left in the cave. Yeah, so I think it's an interesting photo, certainly unusual and very well done.
All right, They Came From Below scored 20.
The next image is Urban Domination. The critique is from Monica Formansky.
This one I thought was actually really fun. You know, I teach students how to work with composition or composites, and so the technical skills that this artist used, I have to commend him or her on their skill set, because looking at just some of the details of the birds, the vultures, the crows, the dog, you know, all those things of making sure that your masking and or selections are clean. This person did a really fine job of doing those things. The layering effect too, with the different houses, really, you know, again, either if they're photographs or if they're composites of the houses next to each other or just adjacent to each other, it gives that sense of crowding. And it's kind of interesting taking this, I'm imagining this three-dimensional picture plane of whatever the houses were, and in some ways reversing what we are trying to accomplish with some photography, taking 2D and making it 3D. In this case, it's almost feels like taking 3D and making it 2D. So it's a fun play with those different techniques. So compositionally speaking, I think that the artist was thinking about a lot of things, even that little line, the electrical line that goes on the upper right, the way that the light is on the left-hand side. There are lots of considerations that this artist was looking at, and I think it was well executed. I love the colors, I love the palette. It's really a very nice piece.
Okay, thank you. Urban Domination scored 23.
The next image is Windows, Clouds, and Little Soul. And critique is Ralph Clevenger.
Simple graphic composition. I think you did a nice job with that. A couple of suggestions might be to crop it tighter and emphasizing that upper right side where the dimensions change, but don't lose the top. I think that staircasing effect really works well. So because it may focus the eye more on that elements in the upper right, the compositional elements. Another suggestion might be to make the reflection in the building the same tone and brightness as the sky. So essentially, by cropping and then doing that, like your building's going to go into stealth mode. And it's going to be maybe a little bit more mystery. You know, we're not going to be quite sure what we're looking at because the tones match the sky. So I don't know if you can envision what I'm seeing, but I think that might be fun to do.
Windows, Clouds, and Little Soul scored 21.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the category and our accepted images.
So in the creative edit category, we have 6 accepted images. The first one is Finding Balance, Patty Gutschall. Second is Morning Shadows, Chris Seaton. No Shit Sherlock, Ellen Clark. Urban Domination, Ines Roberts. And Windows, Clouds, and Little Soul, Bill Banning.
Nope. No, that
Nope.
wasn't it. Shockwave was mine, Sultan.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed Shockwave, yes.
Yeah, Shockwave. And
Shockwave, Judith Barrett.
And then this is
And then Urban Domination, Ines Roberts. And then Windows, Clouds, and Little Soul, Bill Banning.
all right.
All right, got it right.
Nature category coming right up here. First image is A Whole Lot of Yellow, and the critique is by Jeff Lipschitz.
Well, I agree with the title. It is a whole lot of yellow, as this yellow bush on the right takes up more than half the photo. I think focusing on this book sort of unbalances the composition of this image. And my suggestion is, if you walk towards the left and use that left edge of that bush as the right frame, photograph down the river, you'd have what's on the right here as the bottom and the other yellow on the left. What I'm sounding complicated, but I'm really saying is you can still use the yellow, but look down the river and you get a far better composition and a much more interesting photo.
Okay, thank you. A Whole Lot of Yellow scored 16.
The next image is Agave Leaf Detail, critique from Monica Formansky.
I really thought this photograph was quite lovely. I think the lighting, the highlights, and the shadows are very effective in this photograph. I was curious about different cropping options, maybe rather than a kind of a rectangular shape. What would it look like as a square, more square shape? What would it look like as a black and white photograph? You know, just some different things that I was wanting to contemplate. I think that it's really reminiscent of different photographers who've worked with similar plants and So I really appreciate the artist that I'm assuming paying homage in some ways to those photographers. It's a very beautiful image. It has nice texture. I love how the photographer was able to get almost a translucent quality that appears through the leaves. And it's, again, it's a very beautiful photograph.
Okay, thank you. Agave leaf detail scored 22.
Okay, next image is Alaskan Sushi, critique from Ralph Clevenger.
Not sure if this is Brooks River or where, but you know, it's all about the timing. You can sit and watch these bears catch fish all day long, but it's there's only a few moments when it really makes it special. I just love the fact we can see the fish's eye and the position of the fish and everything. And then all that water dripping off the bear really works well too. I did see some issues with many of the images that I looked at, and I think this one shows a bit of over sharpening. And it's especially noticeable in areas of contrast. So you have to be very careful. You want to make your sharpening subtle. Now, this might be a big crop or something, but you know, I don't think you need, now this is a personal thing. I don't think you need this much sharpening. So sometimes it can also be that clarity slider in Lightroom. If you push that too far over, it's going to increase the contrast between the lights and darks, and that'll show up when we zoom in on it. So be careful of over sharpening, and then be careful of losing detail in those whites. You want to try and capture that detail in the white in the original image, and then let the processing work on the shadows maybe. So, but it is a great image.
Okay, thank you. Alaskan Sushi scored 24.
The next image is Big Love, critiqued from by Jeff Lipschitz.
Well, if the story, you know, as we say with nature, the story matters a lot. And I think this is a very cute image, obviously with a good story. I like the way the elephants stand out from the background. I think that's due to two factors. Number one, the color difference, and number two, the background is blurred. If I may make just one small suggestion, I would like to see a little bit more above the hump of the mother elephant. I think it's cropped down a little bit too much, but that's just a small point. I think it's a very nice image.
All right, Big Love scored 23.
Next image is Calla Lilies, critique from Monica Formansky.
You know, it's not too far off from my last critique with the agaves. Again, beautiful highlights and shadows. I love the position that this photographer photographed this from. The contrast with the green and the white is really beautiful. You get such a nice sense of texture too in the leaf. I'm seeing all the little veins in the leaf and in the flowers. Maybe it would be nice to see a little bit more of that flower on the bottom right hand side and the bottom left hand side, just to get a little bit more sense of its form and shape. Maybe cropping it in as well from the right, so we don't have so much of that black negative space, but in general, you did a really good job. I love the gradient almost of the green in the background, just those light greens and the darker greens. It's very, like I said, it has a lot of texture, a lot of form.
Okay, thank you. Calla Lily scored 23.
Next image is Caution, Graphic Sexual Damselfly Content, critique from Ralph Clevenger.
Good title. Okay, well, you know, a hallmark of a lot of great imagery is patience, and I know this certainly took a lot of patience. The timing when you shot it, they will hold that pose a while, but still, you just did a really nice job. And then I really appreciate the fact that you worked with the plane of focus. You know, you got the back of your camera parallel with the subject, so everything came in sharp. And you stopped down a little bit, but you were able to keep it a fairly wide aperture, I think, because that background is nice out of focus. you know your tools really well using, it looks like 2 flashes to capture this. So that was a great move. And your post works looks good. There's no noise in the background, which sometimes there is when you try and bring that up. And it's, although it looks very sharp, that's a factor of using flash, and it is not overly sharpened. I blew this thing all the way up and it looks really good.
Okay, thank you. Caution, graphic sexual damselfly content scored 23.
Next image is Hendry's Sunset, critique from Jeff Lipschitz.
Well, this shows the beach at sunset, and it shows the foreground, midground, and the islands in the background. My only suggestion looking at this is I'd love to see this shot horizontally, because I think you get much more of a feeling for the beach at sunset, having it much wider. Even if those very front rocks are cut out and it was cropped from just above that and horizontal. That's my only suggestion.
All right, thank you. Hendry's Sunset scored 19.
Next image is Iguazu Falls, critique from Monica Formansky.
Well, first of all, I'm impressed that by whomever went and photographed this, quite an adventure. Bravo or brava. You know, it's hard to photograph well, let me backtrack. I guess these landscapes are very beautiful. And if you have some skill, you're going to be able to manage a beautiful shot of these places. That being said, this is a beautiful shot. The sky in the background is spectacular, and the waterfalls are spectacular. I'm not sure if I'm just jaded by, you know, uber professional photographers and wanting more, but I want a little bit more clarity, I guess, through the mist and the fog. So to make it even that more dynamic. But again, that being said, I think that this is a beautiful photograph. I think there's a lot of really nice stuff happening in this image. I wish that, like in the foreground on the left-hand side, like that seems to be a little bit more in focus than the waterfalls. And so I kind of wish that that would be reversed a little bit. So I would have some more focus on the waterfalls rather than that piece in the left foreground. The sky dominates a little bit. It's beautiful sky, but it almost overpowers the beauty of these waterfalls. So I'm sure it's a challenge, and I'm not discrediting anybody's capabilities because I'm not sure I could do any better, but it looks like a beautiful, challenging place to photograph. But I wish that the sky was less dominant than these beautiful waterfalls. But it's, like I said, it's a dynamic shot. I'm jealous. I want to go there. I want to try it myself. Beautiful work.
Okay, thank you. Iguazu Falls scored 19.
Next image is Morning Grooming, critique from Ralph Clevenger.
Okay, technically well done. It's sharp, well exposed. There's not much you can do with that flat light, obviously, or the location, because that's where the bird is, but it is kind of busy. It's not a pretty place. So it's all about the subject and the timing. So would the design maybe be better if you waited for the egret to preen the back feathers rather than the front feathers? Might be, because then you get more of a silhouette. And I think it looks like it's in breeding plumage, or at least starting to get into breeding plumage. So they'll flare those long breeding feathers, and it'll be much prettier when they flare those. And you have a lot of competition with this subject. This is a very popular bird for people to photograph, and it's a beautiful bird.
Okay, thank you. Morning Grooming scored 20, 2-0.
Next image is Nursing, critique from Jeff Lipschitz.
Well, that's a very cute image of a baby otter on its mother's belly. I've never seen a baby nursing on an otter, but it seems to be pretty low down on the mother to be nursing there. I'd love to see the shadow slider increased a bit more so we can see that little area just in front of the baby's mouth. I'm not sure if it would be possible to get a better angle to see a little bit more of the mother, especially the mother's face. But overall, I think it's a very cute image, and it tells a cute story.
All right, thank you. Nursing scored 19.
Next image is Orange Spotted Nudibranch, critique from Monica Furmansky.
So kind of like I was saying with the waterfalls, like I'm jealous. I want to go there and photograph these things and give it a try. I've always had a deep admiration for people who can photograph underwater. It's quite a challenge. I haven't quite tried it. So that being said, when I look at this photograph, I really am captured, if you will, by the oranges and the little sea creature there. I think the composition is kind of nice. I would maybe crop in a little from the left and top a tiny bit just to really zero in on this critter. It's a beautiful shot. I love the contrast between the little critter and the background. It's a beautiful image.
All right, thank you. Orange Spotted Nudibranch scored 21.
Next image is Ready to Run, critique by Ralph Clevenger.
Okay, that Roadrunner is sharp, and I really like the highlight in the eye. That's so critical. But it took me a while in looking at this, and I still haven't figured out what was going on, but it looks like you may have tried to blur or lower the contrast in the background, or maybe the noise reduction to help the bird stand out, or some sort of blurring effect. So what you want to do with post-production, I feel, certainly in the nature category, is you need to make it invisible so that people don't look at the scene and then try and, well, what's going on right there? And I think if you look around the bird, you might see what I'm seeing. So part of the bird is, the middle of the bird's very sharp, but the feathers right on the edge are more blurred. So I kind of understand what you were trying to do, but I don't want to see it. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying see if you can hide it better.
All right, thank you. Ready to Run scored 19.
Next image is Resting Bliss, critique by Jeff Lipchitz.
Well, I love the tight crop on this image of the three seals. I think the wow factor is the seal on the left, and especially the flipper. I've never realized that the flipper looks so much like a hand and fingers. So that was pretty new to me. I think the black seal on the right really makes the composition and balances it very well. So I think well done.
Okay, Resting Bliss scored 21.
Next image is Running to Safety, critique by Monica Furmansky.
I love these little penguins. They look so cute. And I wish I was, again, like the other two I commented on, I wish I was there to photograph this. But there's a lot of movement and motion, and I feel like the photographer did a really good job capturing that movement and motion. In some instances, I kind of wish that it was a little bit clearer, or, you know, there's this fine line between like enhancing motion by giving a little bit of blur and also kind of the still frame where everything is like solid and frozen. So I'm wavering between those two. I think it would be nice to have a little bit more space on the left-hand side for these penguins to be, you know, kind of running into, rather than feeling like they're running into the edge of the frame. But I think overall it's a really nice shot. You've got some nice framing, some beautiful color, and it's a challenge. I mean, we've got the black and white where you're getting some nice contrast, but it would be nice to also have them pop a little bit from the snow in the background a little bit more, which could be something you could mess around with in post-production. But again, in post, you've got to be careful because you don't want to push it too far, and then it just starts to look a little bit silly. So in general, it's a nice shot. I love the sense of motion. I love the angle that all the penguins are moving. It's a nice composition.
Okay, thank you. Running to Safety scored 19.
Next image is Simba, critique from Ralph Clevenger.
Okay, great timing on the face looking and the highlight in the eye again. But, and this is a person, I've judged for the club for several years now, and this is just a personal thing, but I'm wondering why you cropped it square. When my students would do this, I'd ask them if they were shooting on a Hasselblad. So I prefer the 3:2 format in viewing images. Now, when you make a print, that's totally different. You can do anything you want when you make a print and put it on the wall. But in just viewing images on a computer screen, personally, I prefer. And it's too crowded. It's too tight, especially on the left side. So it seems like if you'd left it in a normal horizontal format, 3:2 format, that it might have balanced out a little nicer. It's great timing and everything. It is a bit over sharpened again. I zoomed in on the face, and you can start to see it in the highlights around that eye. And you might have added too much contrast. I'm looking at highlights again. And then that area behind the lion that looks like it might have been sky or something has been burned down too much. It looks like you took your white slider and took it too far down, and it's gone muddy on you. It may have been all blown out white. I'm not sure. And so but you got to be careful about taking things too far. You want to make that post work invisible and natural, especially in this category.
All right, thank you. Simba scored 21.
Next image is Skimmer Reflected, critiqued by Jeff Lipchitz.
Oh, this was a beautiful capture. I just loved it. I liked the reflection and also the slope of the wings and how the reflection and the actual bird's wings are sort of almost touching. So it gives it a very nice composition. I don't have any suggestions to improve it, so well done.
All right, thank you. Skimmer Reflected scored 25.
Next image is Spider, critiqued by Monica Furmansky.
I love the texture in this photograph. It feels, maybe Ralph would agree with me, I'm not sure, but it does feel a little like you push some sliders a little bit too far with some of the texture on it. But I love just the intricacy of the web that you have. I love the feel of the spider itself. The framing, for me personally, like something I would probably do is actually have cropped it a little bit differently so that the spider was a little bit more on the lower left-hand side with a little bit more negative space on the upper right-hand side. That's just my aesthetic, but beautiful light, beautiful texture.
All right, thank you. Spider scored 21.
Next image is the Grand Tetons, critiqued by Ralph Clevenger.
Okay, landscapes need drama, and the weather here really helps provide drama. So it's a great place to be to shoot landscapes. Composition works really well with all the layering of the subjects, the foreground trees, the mountains, the clouds. So you have a lot of depth, which is really important. Sharpness on the mountains looks really good. But again, the foreground, it may not be overly sharpened, but it looks that way, or maybe it's just too much contrast or saturation. But it's in Lightroom, you can try lessening the clarity on just the foreground because you don't want the eye to sit on the foreground. You want us to look at that mountain, and I really think the foreground, because it's so sharp and it has that little bit of color, it's competing with the mountains. So be careful of where you're placing the added sharpening and contrast, and try and make it, again, look as natural as possible for this category.
All right, thank you. The Grand Teton scored 26.
Next image is the Sentinel, critique by Jeff Lipschitz.
Wow, this is a gorgeous image. And I think this is a prime example of very high technical expertise, because you obviously couldn't shoot this image with one exposure. The sky and the Milky Way is very well done. It was shot obviously at night, and so you still have the foreground, which is lit. You have the rock on the right, and that tree, which is also lit. So all of these, I think, are different exposures, and taking a tremendous amount of work. I'd love to talk to this photographer afterwards and see, explaining how much work was put into this image. So I have no suggestions how to improve this. I think it's extremely well done.
All right, thank you. The Sentinel scored 26.
Next image is To the Point, critique by Monica Fermansky.
Not sure if this is the same photographer who photographed the agave at the very beginning, but same sentimentalities. It's nice to see it in black and white. If this is the same photographer, if not, then I appreciate the ways in which this photographer decided to shoot this. I maybe would have lowered the camera just a little bit. I'm a little bit distracted by where the leaves are kind of coming together with the stem. So I would almost like to see the camera lowered a little bit or cropped a little bit. Beautiful light, beautiful shadows and highlights. Very, very nice image, nice composition.
All right, thank you. To the Point scored 23.
Next image is Tufa Milky Way, critique by Ralph Clevenger.
Yeah, technically very well done. The fact that you lit the tufas in the foreground and that you side lit them to bring out that texture, that was a really good idea. I'm curious why you squared it up. So, I always think, what are you hiding when you do that? So, I mean, again, personally, I prefer that 3.2 35 millimeter, even when you're cropping, to crop it to that. For printing, again, it doesn't really matter, but for viewing, there's not much I would suggest doing differently. It's a good shot of tufa with a pretty incredible night sky.
All right, thank you. Tufa Milky Way scored 24.
Next image is Waiting for the Others, critique by Jeff Lipschitz.
I think there's no doubt where your eye goes in this image, straight to the wolf and that reflection in the water. The reason is, number one, the wolf is a much lighter color than the background, and also the background is blurred and the wolf is sharp. If I had any suggestion, I wonder if I wouldn't have cropped the left side more, well, not cropped, let's say taking the photo, shot the wolf with less on the left and more down the river where the wolf is looking. And so the wolf would be on the left third instead of the right third looking out of the photo. I think that's a small suggestion, but overall, I thought it was a really good photograph.
Okay, thank you. Waiting for the Others scored 21.
The next image is You Go First, critique by Monica Fermansky.
Again, another beautiful shot. It's nice and clear and crisp. They are camouflage-ish, so it's kind of challenging to photograph deer out in nature. But I think that the photographer did a nice job. The background works to to exhibit those creatures in the foreground. And I like how you have the rocks on the left-hand side and just kind of on the bottom, just really almost that C curve that really embraces them and frames them. So it's really nice, a very nice composition.
All right, thank you. You go first, scored 18.
And that brings us to the end of the nature submissions.
And for nature, we have 15 accepted images. The first one is Agave Leaf Detail by Zoltan Pushkash. Next is Alaskan Sushi, Bill Hallier. Big Love, Bob Wagoner. Calla Lilies, Ron Abelis. Caution Graphic Sexual Damselfly Content, John Stupnagel. Orange Spotted Nudibranch, Stuart Wilson. Resting Bliss, Ines Roberts. Simba, Bob Rottenberg. Skimmer Reflected, Stephen Lewis. Spider, Ken Pfeiffer. The Grand Tetons, Jeff Lipschitz. The Sentinel, Ron Williams. To the Point, Stephen Sherrill. Tufa Milky Way, Bruce Straits. And Waiting for the Others, Jorge Folco. That ends that category.
Our next category is open. The first image is A Warm Afternoon, critiqued by Ralph Clevenger.
Okay, composition and design are very strong, use of lines and everything. You know, adding a person, yourself, at the end of the path might help it connect with viewers. I'll usually do one with a person, one without. And I kind of learned that Ansel Adams. He wrote in one of his books about adding people to photographs and how important it was, even though most of his famous images never had any people in them. I would probably darken the highlights in the background a bit to reduce that contrast, and maybe just play with that tonal range. I don't want any more shadows, but I'm trying to make it look a little more mysterious moving down the path.
Okay, thank you. A Warm Afternoon scored 24.
The next image is Anniversary Bouquet, critiqued by Jeff Lipschitz.
It's an interesting black and white with a pretty heavy vignette. If you start at the bottom right, it's sort of your eye follows up on that vegetation and curves round to the top right on the fork. The spoon is where your eye lands because it is so bright. Now, I'm not sure if the photographer wanted your eye to fall there and if that's the object of the photo. But I think...
Alert from software update.
Oh my gosh, that might be me, sorry. So either it's meant to be or it distracts a little bit for the photograph. But overall, I thought it was a very interesting photo.
Okay, thank you. Anniversary Bouquet scored 24.
Next image is Bubbles Before the Storm. The critique is by Monica Formansky.
I think the concept and the intention behind this photograph is genuinely interesting and fun. I love the idea of having the building on the right-hand side and these beautiful bubbles and the sky and the bubbles being cheery and against this dramatic backdrop. I guess what I would love is if the photographer was able to reshoot this, is to have a little bit more of the building and to have the bubbles a little bit sharper and more clear. It's a great concept, a great start of an image. If only we can time travel back, right? And go reshoot these things a few more times. But it's, you know, the thought, the intention, the ability to see this moment and want to capture this moment is authentically really lovely. So nice job.
All right, thank you. Bubbles Before the Storm scored 17.
Next image is Coming Home, critique by Ralph Clevenger.
Yeah, color composition worked really well here. You know, I really appreciate the fact that you took this amazing, it's probably a sunset. I'm going to guess it's a sunset shot with the boat in it and not just the sunset, because I think that makes a big difference. And you locked onto that focus really well. Again, over sharpened on the boat. If you zoom in, you know, to 1-to-1 on the boat, you'll notice a white line that goes around the edges of the boat between the black and that's a sure sign of over sharpening. So, because sharpening is working on the contrast areas, the different, you know, that's where it's being sharpened. You can solve some of that problem with the masking slider in Lightroom, with the sharpening tool, moving that masking slider, but just be careful. I know it might look great, super sharp, but I've got a 5K screen here and it's just over sharpened. And I also have a less res screen that I look at things too. So so just be careful of that. But really great composition on this.
Okay, thank you. Coming Home scored 23.
The next image is Disney Interior, critiqued by Jeff Lipschitz.
This is an architectural photo of a much photographed building. I like the black and white rendition because it shows a full range from whites to blacks. I also like the way it is framed on the right side, the bottom, and the left side. I do find all the shapes a little random, and it's hard to find a place for your eye to sort of land on. But again, a very interesting and I think successful photo.
All right, thank you. Disney Interior scored 22.
Next image is Dummies, critiqued by Monica Furmansky.
I feel like I've seen this location before when traveling. Yeah, there are a couple things happening. First and foremost, it just feels creepy just looking at these mannequins with these, vacant eyes staring off in all directions. I think that, beyond that, if I look at the composition, oh my goodness, I almost want to see it shot from a slightly different angle, maybe from a little bit lower, with them a little bit higher up in my frame, maybe with those adult figures in the background, slightly out of focus, so maybe a little bit more shallow depth of field on the figures in the foreground. It has potential. I'm not feeling it 100%, but I get the gist of what the photographer was trying to do or trying to convey. But I think just changing positions, trying to shoot this from different angles, a little bit lower, and playing with depth of field may make this work a little bit better.
All right, thank you. Dummies scored 20-0.
Next image is Ghosts of Christians Past, critiqued by Ralph Clevenger.
Well, I know why you stopped and worked on this photograph. It's a great or a very interesting use of the shadow to help tell the story. But maybe a horizontal orientation would have helped include the whole name of the hall, because I think there's a connection between the name and the statue. So it's just too tight in terms of composition, probably from the point, not something you did in post, but probably from the time you took the picture. Nice, that worked out real well.
Okay, thank you. Ghosts of Christians Past scored 18.
Next image is Gibbon Falls, critiqued by Jeff Lipschitz.
Well, this is a waterfall on a snowy winter day. I know it's taken at 1/5 of a second, which allows the blurring of the water, that's pretty successful, showing the movement. And also I like the white against the brown rock background, which is a nice contrast. I think the composition is good. I wasn't sure. I looked at that little tree in front and I'm not sure if I'd remove it. And then I thought, well, it gives you sort of some depth of field. So I think I'm not sure if I'd remove it or not. Otherwise, a nice picture.
All right, thank you. Gibbon Falls scored 19.
Next image is herons, critiqued by Monica Fermansky.
I really love the way that the photographer shot these two birds. It's actually kind of hard for me to imagine a perfect moment where you could photograph these two in flight like this. I feel personally like I have, again, this is me personally, like I have some challenges with filters. So I would love to see it without the filters on, just to kind of, I want to see the original versus the filtered version. It does look like a painting when you add the filter onto it. And again, I'm a fan of textures. There are a lot of textures that are happening in both the birds and the background and the water. The angles of the bird. I mean, I love the motion that this image creates. So again, I think my personal challenge is the filter. Love to see it without the filter just to compare and contrast, but it's a great shot in general.
All right, thank you. Heron scored 18.
Next image is Icy Leaves. The critique is by Ralph Clevenger.
Well, I really like the idea, and I looked at this for quite a while, but I think it's just too busy to focus the viewer's attention. It's almost like there's two images here. The background, which looks very interesting by itself, and then the white plant laid over the top. So, I mean, I think that background alone is probably a more interesting photograph by itself. So anyway, processing and composition and compositing are technically very well done.
All right, thank you. Icy Leaves scored 21.
Next image is Intersection, critiqued by Jeff Lipschitz.
Well, this is a somewhat minimalist image. And I like the way the photographer zoomed down to the intersection of the four shapes. I think the composition is really good. And with the lines going diagonally corner to corner, it works much better than it would have if that didn't happen. I also like the shapes that are created. The lighting is good. And also the textures are very well shown up on the wood. So overall, I think it's a very good image.
All right, thank you. Intersection scored 21.
Next image is Modern Intrusions, critiqued by Monica Fermansky.
I thought this was a fun image. I would like to see the photograph maybe shot more in a horizontal, especially if you're going to include the two vehicles composited in the foreground. They look like they're kind of squished in there. So it'd be nice if it was maybe horizontal, gave it a little bit more room, a little bit more breadth for those cars to quote unquote breathe. Yeah, it's an interesting image. I would love to talk to the artist to find out what the, why putting those two vehicles in with this historical background, what those two things have to do with each other, which is, you know, interesting too. That makes me question the image and trying to figure it out. So it's not a bad thing.
Okay, Modern Intrusion scored 16.
Next image is Morning Has Broken, critiqued by Ralph Clevenger.
Yeah, composition is really nice. You got a good strong foreground, and then the diagonals moving back to the sunburst. So all that works really well. You probably should work on the black and white processing just a little bit more, maybe lightening the tree trunks. I think that's the biggest area that you could work on in the processing. and maybe bring the whole exposure up a little bit. I realize that you might lose a little more detail down there in the left and the streakiness, but the fact that I know those tree trunks are pretty white. I'm assuming these are aspens. So I think that's an area that would make, if you lighten those up, that's an area that'll make this picture a lot stronger. You might want to play with the clarity slider and see what you can do.
Okay, thank you. Morning has broken, scored 21.
Next image is Peaceful Pastel, critiqued by Jeff Lipschitz.
Well, this is a high key image of buildings and their reflection in very still water. There's also a white vignette around it, which sort of fades out the buildings on the sides. I think it works well with the muted colors, and it adds to the success of the high key image, which creates a certain atmosphere. My only critique or slight is I think the whites in some of these boats in the front, especially on the sides, gets really blown out. But otherwise, I really enjoyed this image.
Okay, thank you. Peaceful Pastel scored 25.
Next image is Pioneer Cemetery, critiqued by Monica Fermansky.
Yeah, this is a beautiful photograph. It's very serene feeling. I'm not sure what the lighting is or how the photographer lit this, if they had a long exposure and were exposing these parts and pieces with some sort of handheld lighting device. But I like how it's contrasted with the sky in the background that you can see behind the trees to give it the sense of evening. It's mysterious, it's a little bit eerie. I'm trying to think if I have any other critiques on this. Maybe I would have maybe cropped out some of the left-hand side. I know some of the details are important, and the photographer might have been wondering where to draw that line. But there's the grave, that's the fifth one in the foreground on the left-hand side, but maybe just behind that a little bit, I would have maybe considered cropping. But it's an interesting image, definitely eerie. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Pioneer Cemetery scored 24.
Next image is Running Low, critiqued by Ralph Clevenger.
This was one of my favorite images of the whole evening. I like everything about it. The light, the subject, the composition. It's technically very well done. There's great shadow detail, good color. The color is really strong. Focus is really good. It looks like you might have even done focus stacking on this. I'm not sure. Your background's nice and blurred, but all those bottles are sharp, certainly the ones in the middle. And then that composition with the two little shot glasses and everything. So it's really very well done, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Running Low scored 25.
Thank you. The next image is, this is Shadows in Perspective, critiqued by Jeff Lipschitz.
Well, if you want an image where leading lines go, you can see that all the lines lead to one point in this image. On top of the wall at the left, they're nautical objects casting a shadow, where the title probably comes from, onto the right wall, on the opposite wall. I like the black and white, the composition with the passage and the leading lines in the lateral or the left third. As Ralph mentioned earlier in one of the pictures, all the lines lead to one point, and I'm trying to make out if there's anything at that point, and I can't see anything. I'm not sure. I tried to enlarge it and see if that was a person at the end there, but I think something interesting at that point would have helped.
Okay, thank you. Shadows in Perspective scored 20.
Next image is Square Lamp, Chrome Stand, critique by Monica Furmansky.
There's a really nice simplicity to this image. Again, I really appreciate photographers who can look at the surroundings, whether they're simple or complicated, but in this case, simple, and see the beauty that happens with just the light hitting those simple objects. And for me, this is one of those examples where someone was paying attention to light, which is foremost in photography. So I really appreciate the way that this photographer was observing the world around him or her, looking at this object, seeing this very basic geometric shape, looking at the way the light was hitting it and photographing it. So you have these very beautiful shadows and highlights, again, texture. It's nicely framed. I do like the square formatting for this image. It works and is reminiscent of a 2 1/4 negative. So it's just, for me, it feels very, very much like home in the world of photography.
All right, thank you. The Square Lamp Chrome Stand scored 20.
Next image is The Eyes Have It, critique by Ralph Clevenger.
Okay, well, nice tight framing. It does really emphasize the eyes, and I don't know if anybody else noticed, but the pupils are dilated a different amount in each eye. And humans can't do that. In fact, if you go to the eye doctor and they see this, you've got a problem. So I found it just fascinating that that the owls can do this. I'm wondering why the square crop again. And so I'm going to venture that maybe a vertical 3:2 crop would have been stronger, just showing more of the bottom of the bird. Because I know you cropped it. I know you didn't shoot it this way. So sometimes it's pretty easy to do a vertical rendition from your horizontal images. So anyway, see how you like it by looking at it as a vertical.
All right, thank you. The Eyes Have It scored 22.
Next image is The Three Gossips, critique by Jeff Lipchitz.
Well, I think that's a great title, and this is one of my favorite images of the evening. It's a composite of 3 flowers. I think it's very well lit from the left side, but there's also rim lighting, and the rim lighting shows up if you really zoom in the hairs on top of the image, and also makes, like if you look at the middle image, that leaf on the left of the middle image becomes almost translucent. The color and the textures of the image I thought were beautiful, and as are the shapes. Let's see, the rim, the yellow border, I think works very well with this image. To make one point, nothing to do with the image, the very first category, creative, this could be entered in that, Bill, because it's a composite. So just making that point. A great image.
All right, thank you. The Three Gossips scored 23.
Next image is The Watchmen, critique by Monica Furmansky.
Yeah, there's so much going on in this photograph, which I love, and I'm also challenged by at the same time. So the patterns in the peacock, the patterns in the wall, the repetition and patterns of the background, like it's almost like so much that my eyes are a little bit overwhelmed. But at the same time, the peacock does stand out against the backdrop and the wall. So I've got these competing things in my brain of like, whoa, that's too much patterns. And at the same time, like I kind of love all these patterns that's happening at the same. So as far as the peacock goes, I love the gaze. I think the gaze is really important. It helps to detract a little bit or contrast with the background, which I think is nice. and also the verticality of the peacock contrasting with the horizontalness, if that's a word, of the background and the wall. So there is a lot happening here. My eyes are definitely on fire.
All right, thank you. The Watchman scored 20.
Next image is To the Rescue, critiqued by Ralph Clevenger.
Yeah, great point of view here. And the composition, it's really sharp. It's interesting. Even the patterns in the water from the blades is interesting. And the colors in that background, they kind of match the colors on the helicopter. So it's really a very well done image.
All right, thank you. To the Rescue scored 21.
The next image is Traffic Jam, critiqued by Jeff Lipchitz.
This photo of birds taking off was actually shot at 1,000th of a second. So it does gets sort of some of the birds, or the one in the middle and one or two others, in sharp focus. Also, it's shot at 300 millimeters, so you get more compression, and it looks like, how did these birds take off without crashing into each other? So I think the photo does well showing the traffic and the congestion, and you needed your eye to settle somewhere, and luckily, or not luckily, but anyway, the bird in the middle allows the eye to settle, and that's the focal point. Without that, it would have been sort of too much chaos. So it works.
All right, thank you. Traffic Jam scored 21.
Next image is Union Station, critiqued by Monica Furmansky.
I think this photograph fulfills a lot of the compositional rules. We've got beautiful symmetry, C curves. I mean, you name it. We've got nice balance. I love the verticality of this image, the symmetry. You know, whoever photographed this was really seen with their camera and looking at the world and cropping the world in a very specific way. I don't really have much to critique about this piece. I appreciate the tonal range of the image as well. I love the figure. I think the figure is really important. If, you know, a couple of times people have commented about, you know, wanting to add figures or people to the images to make them stronger. And this might be one of those instances where, yes, having a person breaking kind of the pattern, if you will, and adding a little bit more personality to the image really is effective.
Okay, thank you. Union Station scored 23.
Next image is Water, Earth, and Sky. The critique is by Ralph Clevenger.
Okay, in my opinion, you're missing a subject. You've got a foreground and a background, but you don't have a subject. So the POV is great. It's almost like you need a person standing behind that wave, you know, going through the water or something. I see the land and the clouds as a background, not as a subject. So I'm kind of assuming you're thinking the wave is the subject, but then your composition then needs to show way more of the wave. So just maybe dropping the camera down lower and reducing that background might have given you a much stronger image.
Okay, thank you. Water, Earth, Sky scored 18.
The next image is Water Lily and Penny, critiqued by Jeff Lipchitz.
Yeah, this water lily sort of makes this image. It's well placed compositionally. Without it in the photo, the eye would have nowhere to settle. Maybe on that penny. I'll kind of try to figure out, why did the photographer call that coin a penny when it looks like a quarter? And I think he called it a penny because of the name Lily. So Lily and Penny being two girls' names. Now, I might be way, way off on that, but anyway. So I think it's a very good image.
Okay, thank you. Water Lily Penny scored 20.
Next image is Water Play, critiqued by Monica Furmansky.
There's a lot of motion happening in here and I love it. I think the shutter speed is really nice. I like the framing of this image. It looks fun. It's well composed. I love the colors. I don't really have much to critique about this. I'm not sure if, again, I have kind of some weird thing with filters. I'm not sure if there's a filter on it, but it looks almost like an advertisement. And I love how in the glasses of the subject, you can see the photographer present. It's really nice.
All right, thank you. Water Play scored 23.
The next image is Wine Country Autumn, critiqued by Ralph Clevenger.
This is one of those scenes where that sunny day contrast isn't helping. The light on the grapes works great. But they would also work in soft light. So the house is shaded. So, it's not being directly lit by the sun, but it's in the shade. And it looks like you probably did some dodging on the house, which was a good idea. But that bright sunny tree is pulling the eye again away from the foreground a little bit. So all that contrast makes the image, I think, busy. I really do like the composition. I think this is a great scene with the foreground and everything. I don't know what I would do differently in this lighting environment. I'm not sure. Maybe in post, pushing that shadow slider up and getting a little more HDR type of a feeling might improve it. But I just would go back and shoot it in a different lighting environment.
All right, thank you. Wine Country Autumn scored 21.
The next image is Winter Games, critiqued by Jeff Lipschitz.
Found this an interesting image of this park in winter, which is almost black and white, except for that orange rim around the base of the merry-go-round in the foreground. It's interesting because I think without that orange rim, maybe your eye would focus first of all on that slide in the middle, framed by the trees, and then move off. But with that orange and it being in the foreground, I think it definitely attracts your eye first. I think the trees are very well lit. You can see the texture, even though you have a black sort of outline. I'm glad you could see the light on that and the texture. The mood is of emptiness and loneliness, I think, without the kids, which is well done.
All right, thank you. Winter Games scored 23.
And that finishes the category for us.
Yes, it does. And we have 18 accepted images, starting with A Warm Afternoon, Bill Hallier. Anniversary Bouquet, Judith Barrett. Coming Home, Jeff Lipschitz. Disney Interior, Bob Rottenberg. Where are we here? Icy Leaves, Zoltan Pushkash. Intersection, Ron Abelis. Morning Has Broken, Charlie Henry. Peaceful Pastel, Ellen Clark. Pioneer Cemetery, Stuart Wilson. Running Low, Bill Banning. The Eyes Have It, Don Green. The Three Gossips, Ron Williams. To the Rescue, Stephen Sherrill. Traffic Jam, Steve Colwell. Union Station, Chris Seaton. Water Play, Carrie Topliff. Wine Country Autumn, George Wellick. And Winter Games, Jorge Fulco. that completes that category.
All right, that brings us to the people category. And the first image is 65, the new 40, critique by Monica Fermansky.
You know, I was thinking when I saw this photograph, or just now when I saw it, I was thinking about Ralph's comments about the last photograph with the sea and sky and land, but no person. So here we are, Ralph. There's the person added into the image. Yeah, I think it's a fun photograph. I feel like there might be a little bit too much sky. I want maybe to crop that down a little bit and move my camera angle. That being said, technically, I think you did a really good job. You know, the sea foam is fantastic. The textures, I keep talking about textures tonight. Maybe it's a texture kind of night, but the texture in the sky is beautiful too. So, and great smile and great personality on your subject.
All right, thank you. 65, the new 40, scored 19.
The next image is a close shave, the critique by Ralph Clevenger.
Nice light. I love the smile on the boy's face, the one who's doing the shaving. And it's good use of depth of field. The background's slightly out of focus, so it helps separate them. Maybe a lower angle. I want more of the smile. So a lower angle might make it more interesting, shifting over, maybe even in a little bit tighter. We don't really need that foreground here, but it's the expression we need. We need a lot more of that expression.
Okay, thank you. A close shave scored 21.
The next image is a good cigar, critique by Jeff Lipchitz.
Oh, it's a photo of a smiling lady posing with a cigar in her left hand. I like the colors of her top and a headscarf. I think they go very well together. I also like the sharp focus in her eyes and the blurred background, so letting her really stand out from the background, which is also darker. Anything, suggestions to prove? Maybe some minor is that sun shining on her top of her forehead could be a little distracting, but I think that's minor. So I think it's a great image of this smiling lady.
Okay, thank you. A good cigar scored 22.
The next image is Daydreaming with critique from Monica Fermansky.
I think the first thing that stands out for me with this photograph is that it feels very painterly, and it's very soft focus, which I don't mind. There's something a little bit mysterious about the subject and the subject's state of mind, which intrigues me. So there's a little bit of an emotional or psychological quality that maybe, or maybe not, the photographer intended to have. So for me, that makes it interesting. The gaze of the subject looking off to the left-hand side into the area on the upper right-hand side that is vacant kind of works for me in some ways. It's an interesting photograph. I like the light. I like the soft focus in this case.
All right, thank you. A Daydreaming scored 17.
The next image is Les Jeunes Filles, critique by Ralph Clevenger.
Lighting, composition, depth of field all work really well. I think she just needs to look at us and maybe relax the pose a little bit.
Okay, thank you. La Jeunes Fille scored 18.
Next image is Life's Lines, critique by Jeff Lipchitz.
I found this very interesting, and because of the fact, one of the facts is it was shot with an iPhone. So at first I looked at it and I thought, boy, that was so well done, getting that face behind these branches to be in focus with an iPhone hardly seems possible. And that's probably because I think they might have been added post-production. I can't be sure, but it looks like it. there's also no shadows on the face from these branches. My only suggestion is that right eye is very, very dark, and I would like to see that lightened up a lot more. But again, a very interesting picture.
All right, thank you. Lifelines scored 24.
Next image is Morning First Cup, critiqued by Monica Fermansky.
I have to say that I really like this photograph a lot. Not only do I love the light that's hitting the subject, the foreground with the coffee cup and the steam coming out of the coffee, but it's, and the colors, the color contrast, that red and the blue-green. It has a very real feel to it. It doesn't, and I could be mistaken, but it doesn't feel like it's trying to be anything more than what it is. And I love the kind of emotional impact that this photograph has. It just feels like it's not contrived. It feels like it was taken in a moment of vulnerability. And I think for me, that's what makes it a little more endearing. On top of that, it's also reminiscent of maybe some Renaissance paintings as well. I can see almost like some Vermeer light hitting this, which intrigues me.
Okay, thank you. Morning First Cup scored 24.
Next image is Musical Distancing, critiqued by Ralph Clevenger.
Well, I love what you saw here. It's a very creative point of view. You could probably crop out the hallway with the arch on the other person to help keep our eye on the violin. And technically, it looks like you had to bring the exposure up. Not sure if that's true or not, but subsequently you then got a lot of noise, and then you had to reduce the noise. And you lost sharpness and then you had to sharpen more, and really the violin and the hand, when you go into even 50%, it's kind of falling apart. But gosh, what a great eye. So keep at it.
Okay, thank you. Musical Distancing scored 22.
The next image is People on the Beach, critiqued by Jeff Lipschitz.
Well, I really like this image of this rocky beach with three couples standing at the ocean and their reflection in that water behind them. There's a fourth couple, I'm not sure if everyone has seen, on the left, right in front of that fallen tree. I like the grayish tone of this image, except for the red on actually two of the couples in front at the ocean. I think the rocks in the foreground, and the foreground being 2/3 of the photo, really captures the sense of place very well. To improve it, my only suggestion, a slight thing, is on the left side. I would crop that left side just to cut that fourth couple out, and which would not interfere with that branch of the fallen tree. A very good image that captures a sense of place very well.
Okay, thank you. People on Beach scored 20.
The next image is Shall I Play for You, critiqued by Monica Fermansky.
I'm a huge fan of travel photography, so I love seeing these images. I think that, again, the photographer was, paying attention to his or her surroundings and trying to photograph what they see around them. I think the challenging thing with some travel photography is that for some of us, we have an idea in our mind that maybe we're more reminiscent of times past. And so it's challenging to try to photograph subjects in a more contemporary manner. That being said, I think it would be nice to see a little bit more information. Maybe I would have shifted my perspective or my angle over to the right, maybe looking down and up at the subject a little bit more, trying to lose a little bit of that sidewalk. But I love the colors. I love the gaze of the subject. And I love that the photographer was paying attention to the scenes around them.
Okay, thank you. Shall I Play for You scored 19.
The next image is Sing for Joy, critiqued by Jeff Lipschitz.
Well, this is a black and white environmental portrait of this lady singing. Because it's an environmental portrait, I don't mind a hand being so prominent in front and the mic covering part of her face. I love her smile. She's not only smiling with the mouth, her eyes are also smiling. A suggestion, if you look, it's very small. To the right in front of her hair, there's that sort of bright area there in the middle of all that gray. I would just get rid of that. Otherwise, a fun picture.
Okay, thank you. Sing for Joy scored 20, 2-0.
The next image is The Innocent, critiqued by Ralph Clevenger.
Yeah, technically very well done, especially on handling all those tones in black and white. You might be able to open up the shadows in just the hair. The rest of it looks fine, but you can go in and it's not even shadows sometimes, just using, bringing up the highlight or white slider on hair like that might make it pop a little more. The lighting on the face is perfectly exposed, great detail, helps draw the eye to that expression. And it's a nice point of view as well.
Okay, thank you. The Innocent scored 21.
The next image is The Observer, critiqued by Monica Fermansky.
I like the angle that this was shot, that vertical line between the bikes and the contrast with the flowers, the yellow and the green with the red of the bike. I love the angle of the subject in the doorway. You know, these are kind of classic street documentary style photographs. And again, the photographer is really being observant about where they are and what they're looking at and playing with different perspectives. So not sure I have too much more to critique on that at this point.
The Observer scored 19.
Okay, the next image is Vietnam Lady, critiqued by Ralph Clevenger.
Overall, I like the image. She's a great subject. I don't think you need the color treatment in the background, though. It tends to draw the eye away. I like the treatment on the woman, but the color tends to draw the eye away from the woman's face. And I keep looking at that woman's smile in the upper left-hand corner. So I would probably crop this even tighter, just so you eliminate that woman up there. Don't lose the top of the old lady's hat. So it's just basically maybe pulling up from the bottom a little bit to lose the smile up there.
All right, thank you. The Vietnam Lady scored 20, 2-0.
The next image is Wash Day, critiqued by Jeff Lipschitz.
Now, this is again one of my favorite images of a lady pouring water on clothes. And Monica just mentioned that some other picture reminded me of a Vermeer. Well, when I looked at this, it certainly does look like a Vermeer. She stands out very well from the background due to the light on her, the focus, and the color difference between her and the background. As a bonus, there's also action. Previously, when I judged, I mentioned clap. You need 2 for a good picture: color, light, action, pattern. And she's got color, light, action, 3. Would I change anything to be, again, minor? You notice between her hand and her apron, that path at the back is brightly lit. I would just darken that. So the focus is totally on her, but that's a small point. I think it's a very good image.
Okay, thank you. Wash Day scored 24.
Next image is water framed, critiqued by Monica Fermansky.
I mean, who doesn't love an action shot of a surfer, right? I mean, we've got some beautiful waves. I think this is a nice shot. The photographer caught the surfer at a really nice time. The shutter speed looks really good. It's capturing the texture in the waves and freezing the motion nicely. I feel like I would love, and maybe I'm just a little bit jaded from looking at so many photographs of surfers, but I would love a little bit more color, like saturation in the ocean to really make it pop a little bit more. That might be my only critique, but overall I think that the photographer did a good job. That the lip of the wave on the upper right hand side is just beautiful, so nice job.
All right, thank you. Water frame scored 20, 2-0.
The next image is Welcome, critiqued by Ralph Clevenger.
Okay, well, I'm not quite sure what happened here technically. The image is quite small, and there's a lot of noise. So you have to be careful of things like too much color saturation can make an image break apart like this. The subject certainly has potential, but she needs to look more interested and focused or react to the camera or something. So there's technical issues here and a little bit in posing. Certainly what you saw, though, has potential to make an image.
All right, thank you. Welcome scored 16. And that's the end of the people category. We have 7 accepted images. The first one is A Close Shave, Bill Hallier. A Good Cigar, Bob Rottenberg. Lines, Judith Barrett. Morning First Cup, Dave Basso. Musical Distancing, Bill Banning. The Innocent, Jeff Lipschitz. And Wash Day, Stephen Sherrill.
Okay, that brings us to our print category. We had 3 prints that were made by each of the judges. And the first image is Black and White Bird, critiqued by Jeff Lipschitz.
Well, let me just start off by saying that this image on the screen is very different from this. Oh, it doesn't show up there, from the image I'm holding in my hand. Because my my suggestion for the image that I'm holding, it came out very flat and there was very little contrast. So my suggestion was to increase the blacks, which you see over here. The image I'm holding is just very, very gray with no contrast. I'm not sure if it's the matte paper too. My other suggestion is to get rid of some of the distractions. I would crop down the top and get rid of all that white and crop down to the branch that's going over the bird's head. And I'd also crop the left side down to where the 2 branches cross. I like the little bit it looked like of rim lighting, which makes the bird stand out a bit better. But yeah, the print and what we're seeing on the screen are very different.
Okay, thank you. Black and White Bird scored 22.
Next image is Sunrise, and this is critiqued by Monica Fermansky.
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. Like, it's such a different scene, the images on screen than it is in person. And on the screen, you know, I love seeing just some of the landscape in the foreground and how it transitions to the background with that atmospheric perspective. The print, I don't think is as successful as what I'm seeing on the screen right now. And it's not that the image, I always have this challenge, and I think this is part of the challenge for the photographer who printed this, is that it's hard to know what type of paper to print your images on that's going to be successful. And in this case, the print was printed more on like a semi-gloss paper, which was given to me to look at and evaluate. And not that that's bad, but I think in the case of this photographic image, it may actually serve this image better to be on more of a matte paper, like an enhanced matte paper, because the image on the kind of semi-gloss paper makes it look almost a little bit too graphic. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it loses the photographic quality, and it makes it look more like an image that's ready for some sort of graphics to go over the top of it. So I think the image is beautiful, and it has so much potential. I think, again, I would try different papers, different samples to really see what's going to resonate with this image.
Okay, thank you. Sunrise scored 22.
The next image is Tunnel of Light, critiqued by Ralph Clevenger.
Okay, well, it's an incredible piece of architecture to begin with. But as far as the print goes, I really like your choice of paper on this one. I think it worked really well. Great use of lines. I mean, you really did this place justice. And I think the lighting is very strong here. The best part's that person perfectly centered down the hallway there. Tonal range, technically very well done. Good contrast for black and white. Really, really, it was a great print to look at.
Okay, thank you. Tunnel of Light scored 24. So for the print category, we have 3 accepted images: Black and White Bird, Bill Banning; Sunrise, Ron Abeles; and Tunnel of Light, Ron Williams. And that is the categories, except for one more.
All right, so that brings us to our unscored submissions. We have one unscored submission. It's a video. We're going to make a quick switch here and bring that up. Judges, we had equal number of still images, so you're all welcome to comment on this once we're finished with it. La Conchita.
La Conchita is a small unincorporated village on the coast, just south of the Santa Barbara-Ventura County border. This magical oasis was devastated by 2 recent landslides, one in 1995 and another in 2005. Both landslides destroyed several homes, and the one in 2005 claimed 10 lives. La Conchita is an active and eclectic community of about 300 residents and has been home to several famous artists and architects. The beach at La Conchita is accessible via a tunnel under the 101 freeway. The beach ranges between Muscle Shoals on the south and Rincon Point on the north. The bike path along the freeway also has an exit at La Conchita. Rincon Point is a world-famous surfing spot, and good surf extends all the way to Muscle Shoals and beyond. Many interesting wonders can be found along the beach and can be found within an easy stroll from the tunnel entrance.
Okay, I'm going to ask for any comments from our judges.
Well, I can start if you like. I think that too much information was trying to be put into 1 minute. And the content, it was a bit rushed, and I found that the panning and zooming was really overdone a little bit, and also the transitions between the scenes were too long. So I found it a little difficult to watch because of those 3 factors.
Yeah, and I'll add, I think this is a longer video because it's the ending is so abrupt. I think you're trying to meet that 1 minute thing, so it doesn't really have an ending. You could end with a sunset. That's a beautiful place for a sunset. And I think more video footage would be helpful. There's quite a bit of action, like the surfing stuff and showing people on the bikeway. So there's quite a bit of opportunity for actual video footage. So I think more of that would be good. And the only suggestion I can give you for this is lose that one vertical. You've got all horizontals, you fill the screen, and then there's that one vertical. So anyway, just lose the vertical and just add a horizontal in there. And I think that would improve the design of the film.
Yeah, I agree with both Jeff and Ralph. I think Jeff alluded to the kind of pushes and pulls, which are the Ken Burns effect, right? Where you're kind of zooming in and zooming out. I would get rid of that. There was a point in the video where the narrator was talking about the artists and the great art. Well, I want to see that. If you're going to talk about that, show me some examples of that artwork. And I agree with Ralph too, like wanting to see more people to really give a sense of the spirit of Carpenter, or of this, not Carpenter, sorry, of this space. I think it would be really, really helpful. But I think it's a really good first draft, and I would encourage the artist, the cinematographer who's working on this, to keep working on it, because I think you're on the right track. But adding some of those details will be helpful.
All right, thank you. That wraps up our evening. We want to say thanks to our judges, all the participants, to the audience. 2 weeks from now, a program night where we're going to have some of our members doing a judging for a international interclub competition in the Niagara area. And then on 4th Tuesday, we'll be doing a program on the International Photography Scavenger Hunt and some discussion about keeping 4th Tuesdays going. With that, I'm going to stop the sharing.
Oh, can I say something?
Sure.
I thought tonight's judging was just terrific. I learned so much on every photo they judged, all three of them. Kudos. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Agreed.
Thank you, judges.
Yeah,
Really appreciate it.
I was taking notes.
Yes.
Very cool.
Well,
and
you guys have a lot of good work to look at, so thank you.
You know, we had 83 still photographs and one video. That's one of our largest numbers. And thank you to the judges for bearing with us and giving us the consistent scoring and comments. It was really wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, everybody. We will see you in 2 weeks.